Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is the best show of 2023, fight me. This show is about a 23-year-old guy named Scott Pilgrim. He plays as a bassist in a band named Sex Bomb and lives with his cool gay roommate Wallace Wells. After having a dream about a really pretty roller skating girl with dyed hair and a deep soothing voice, he wakes up and tells Wallace about how he had another dream about the girl of his dreams. Wallace proceeds to not care as he heckles Scott to get his own place and gets himself some coffee. Scott proceeds to leave and meet up with his band for band practice, where we get to meet Kim, a hot-headed drummer, Steven Stills, a chill songwriter who does guitar and vocals, Knives Chow, a naive and excitable high schooler who's dating Scott, and young Neil, Steven Stills' airy-headed but super funny younger brother. They proceed to have genuinely one of my favorite musical numbers in the entire show. Oh my god, guys, please check out this show's music, though they doubt their talents and proclaim they suck. After band practice, the gang meets up to go to a party. On their walk there, young Neil asks Scott why he isn't bringing Knives to the party, and Scott explains they aren't really dating, and that it's mostly one-sided. Kim then berates Scott in one of the funniest exchanges in the entire show. As they get to the party, Scott grabs himself some Kool-Aid and takes a seat, only to see the actual girl of his dreams. Scott kinda slips in next to her and proceeds to ask the most iconic line from the show.
Hi. You know Sonic the Hedgehog?
After he rizzes up the girl, he asks if she's real. He then flees before his Sigma behavior crumbles the building with its pure powers. While he tries to escape, he bumps into Julie Powers, who hates him. Scott asks who the girl he met was, and Julie explains that her name is Ramona Flowers, and she moved to Canada from New York after a bad breakup. She also explains Ramona has a job delivering DVDs for Netflix, and that she's Ramona's only friend. She notices Scott repeating everything she said, and forbids him from dating Ramona Flowers. Scott goes home and orders a movie off of Netflix, and waits at the door for Ramona to arrive. I could explain why I love this scene, but I think it's pretty obvious. It's wholesome and it builds Scott's character. When Ramona finally arrives, Scott rushes to open the door and greets Ramona. After a really funny interaction, Ramona hands him the DVD and starts skating off. But before she can skate off, Scott stops her and asks her if she's from his dreams. Ramona says she is, and explains how there's just a really convenient subspace highway running through Scott's head that she uses to get around faster. She also has a line where she says it's 3 miles in 15 minutes, but doesn't know what it is in kilometers, which is later referenced again in a scene that I can't show due to spoilers. The show is just full of small payoffs and foreshadows, and this is one example of many. Scott asks to hang out with Ramona in a really dorky way, and Ramona agrees. Later that day, they meet up. They have a romantic date in the park where they discuss where they're from and get to know each other better. As they do all of this, a mysterious man in a room full of monitors spies on them and asks to see a man named Matthew Patel. As Scott and Ramona's date continues, a blizzard starts to pick up. They hold hands as they continue through the blizzard until they find a mysterious door. The door leads into a subspace highway that warps them into Ramona's apartment. Ramona makes Scott some tea and goes to grab him a blanket. Scott waits for a bit, but it's too chilly, so he walks into Ramona's room where, oops, I can't show that or talk about that on YouTube. Ramona is in the middle of changing when Scott walks in. Scott of course closes his eyes before Ramona hugs him and they start kissing. Then they start hugging in bed. Scott doesn't want to go past cuddling though, so he just sleeps with her in his bed. In all seriousness, this is a great scene, and this is where they truly get intimate and interested in each other. The scene swaps to Matthew Patel, Ramona's first evil ex, and Gideon Graves, Ramona's 7th evil ex, who also leads the League of Evil Exes. They discuss how Scott wants to date Ramona, which they both do not like. They also talk about how Scott is jobless, dating Kim, and his fighting experience. Matthew talks about how he's going to fight Scott to the death, as the scene changes back to Scott in Ramona's bed. Scott asks if they can see each other more and invites her to see his band. Scott gleefully walks home to tell Wallace about how great his night with Ramona was. Wallace immediately tells Scott to break up with Knives. Scott hesitantly agrees before he goes to grab a letter from the table. The letter is from Matthew Patel and is a challenge to Scott. Scott doesn't really care because the letter is boring. Time skips to the auditorium. Knives is entering the auditorium before Wallace calls her over and introduces her to Stacy Pilgrim, Scott's younger sister. Knives talks about how excited she is to see Sex Bomb play, while Wallace and Stacy tease the fact that there's bad news. Knives is confused but quickly spots Scott and runs over to him. Scott panics as he sees Ramona enter the auditorium and runs into the rehearsal room with Kim, young Neil, and Steven, leaving poor Knives very confused. They talk about how nervous they are to play and how the first band pulled out, but they step forward and play. Things are going fine until an explosion is heard and Matthew Patel crashes through the ceiling. He flies down towards Scott, winding up a punch before Scott blocks it and tosses Matthew away. And that's where I have to stop. I'm not going to go over the entire show, that would take forever and be really derivative, but if my description of the show sounds even remotely interesting, please go watch it. For the rest of this review, I'll just be going over the individual aspects I love, but there will be major spoilers. So please go into this show blind. It's a phenomenal show and is a must-watch. If you're leaving now, thank you for watching and go watch Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. For the rest of you who have already watched the show, here are my thoughts. The fight scenes in this show are an absolute spectacle. They mix in a lot of surrealist fantasy, often with plenty of references or interesting set pieces. I especially like when the show tries to emulate combat in games, it just looks so good. The fight scenes are really long, meaning you get tons of action, and it's just a pure joy to watch it. The animation is incredibly fluid and satisfying, and the colors just go off. Personally, I would say these are some of my favorite fight scenes of any show. The animation is stellar. This show definitely falls more into the camp of cartoonish comedy-focused animation over a more realistic, grounded approach, so the characters are constantly making interesting poses and doing interesting things. The style itself is a really nice cross between Western and Eastern animation, and it's one of my favorite art styles I've ever seen in an anime. I also really love the character designs. I think Ramona looks a lot better here than in the game, for instance. The characters are probably this show's greatest strength. I won't go over all of them, just the most relevant ones, but I found a lot to enjoy in every character this show had. Scott Pilgrim, while obligatory statement, is flawed, is also incredibly relatable. He's very nerdy, he's goofy, the way he tries to slide in next to Ramona is really funny and relatable, him talking to his future self is great, and he's just a generally really likable character. And if for whatever reason you're still watching this, even though I gave you the warning, and are concerned about the whole him dating Knives situation, it's handled very gracefully and respectfully, and it's one of my favorite arcs he goes through. My only slight wish is that there was more of him. He's just that likable and relatable. I swear, he and Young Neil are the two funniest characters ever. Ramona Flowers is the true star of the show, however, and has become my favorite character. She's actually become sort of a goal for a lot of trans people, I've realized, mostly because of her deep voice, dyed hair, badass rollerblades, and her amazing mix of femininity and coolness, and to be honest, I can definitely get behind that. And she goes on this giant manhunt to talk to each of her suspects, the majority of them being her evil exes. In doing so, not only does she get to meet all the people in Scott's life, she also gets to confront and make amends with most of her evil exes. Her interactions with everyone are always fantastic, but I think my personal favorite interaction she has is with Roxy. Roxy's my favorite evil ex, and her story of being abandoned by Ramona feels so real and emotional. Them being able to mend their past in what's probably my favorite fight scene, and then be friends again was really powerful. And before you say it, the kiss at the end has nothing to do with this being my favorite. Okay, the kiss at the end is why this is my favorite. Are you happy? To be honest, all of the evil exes are so amazing, but there's 7 of them, so I'll just go through them quickly. Matthew Patel is really funny, and I love his theater kid behavior. Lucas Lee is really funny, and I love his skater boy attitude. Todd Ingram's story of finding out he's gay because Wallace essentially manipulates the movie director into making them kiss is both very funny and very compelling with a great arc for him. Roxy is of course my favorite and is also a great trans girl, to be honest. The twins are, they're okay. The robot is probably the greatest thing about them. And Gideon Graves is very layered, very funny guy that I really like. To be honest, the Evil Exes are collectively one of my favorite antagonist groups in media. There are also many side characters I love. Wallace, Kim, and Knives could get their own segments, but I think you get the point. I really like this cast a lot, and their amazing voice actors, varied designs, and great personalities make them all memorable in my eyes. The music in this show is phenomenal, a lot of it taking inspiration from retro games. There are also lots of great vocal tracks, such as the phenomenal opening theme, the catchy and droning I Feel Fine, and the amazing head-bopping Skater Boy theme, United States of Whatever. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is one of my favorite scores of any show, up there with SpongeBob and Death Note. To be extra thorough, I've decided to also watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie, and wow, that might be the best movie I've ever watched. But now with the knowledge from that film, I can confidently say that the anime improves on the depth of the 7 villains by such a large amount. Scott's also so much more likable in this adaptation. Hell, everyone is so much more likable. Ramona and Scott's relationship is also drastically improved. I was kinda confused why Ramona really likes Scott at all in the movie, whereas here I fully understand why. Scott's a lot less weird, but it's still him. They also improve a lot on the LGBTQ representation. The movie kinda had a snarky but supportive attitude, while the anime is full-blown friendly towards LGBTQ, without any character sacrifices. Wallace is still a scamp when it comes to guys, but it's handled a lot more gracefully here. Roxy is less sexualized here, but it doesn't take away from the fact she likes sex. It's a great middle ground, and I really appreciate how it was handled. Now, if we're talking about which I enjoyed more, I think Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a fantastic must-watch anime that has become my favorite in most categories, whereas Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is genuinely a new contender for my favorite movie ever. They're both amazing, and you need to watch them now. I'm giving Scott Pilgrim Takes Off a 10 out of 10. I'm also giving Scott Pilgrim vs. the World a 10 out of 10, and I need to rewatch it a billion times and then review it one day. Anyways, go have a good one, you deserve it. Hey guys, thank you for watching the video. I hope you liked it. I know I had fun making it. I've been very passionate about Scott Pilgrim, so I'm glad I got to talk about it. If you liked watching this, and you liked watching me, first off, thank you. And second off, I have a second channel where I upload things like vlogs and other unscripted stuff, and I want to start doing more random videos where I play games, mostly with friends. And also I want to start doing a Let's Plays of games soon, which I'm still currently setting up, but that could be definitely down the road, or definitely soon. So if you like this, you should go check out that channel if you'd like. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It took me not too long, but, you know, still worked pretty hard on it. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Thank you. Bye.